it talks about Abel. Abel is in the hall of faith, right? So by faith, Abel offered to God a more acceptable sacrifice than Cain, although through which he was commended as righteous. So Abel was not killed because he was a sinner and unrighteous. He was commended as righteous by God. God commending him by accepting his gifts, and through his faith, though he died, he still speaks. So Abel was a man of faith. Abel was a man who God calls righteous, and yet he was cut off. He was murdered by Cain. So the argument of Eliphaz is, of course, very bad, and it is wrong. And he is saying things in defense of God that are not true. And that is a very, very bad thing to do. So it is very wicked to speak on behalf of God and be wrong and teach false things and say false things. It will make God very angry. And we see at the end of this book that that is true, that God is upset with Eliphaz and Bildad and Zophar. And Job is the one who has to make sacrifices for them on their behalf, for God to forgive them. So as he says, I have seen those who plow iniquity and sow trouble reap the same. So he's saying that bad things happen to bad people. If you do bad things happen to you. So therefore, you must have done some terrible sin to have deserved all this. And why don't you just repent and God will restore you? That is pretty much the basis of this whole argument. So I won't read the whole thing. There is one interesting portion where he says, and now a word was brought to me stealthily. My ear received the whisper of it amid thoughts from visions of the night. When deep sleep falls on men, dread came upon me and trembling. A spirit glided past my face. The hair of my flesh stood up. It stood still, but I could not discern its appearance. A form was before my eyes. There was silence. Then I heard a voice. Can mortal man be in the right before God? Can man be pure before his maker? It seems like he's saying God whispered to him in the night, or some spirit appeared to him and gave him this knowledge and wisdom. So it's as if he attributed some of his wisdom to God. And again, it is very bad to put the wrong words in God's mouth and to speak falsely on God's behalf. And anybody who teaches, we're warned that that we're responsible for what we teach. If we lead people astray, that it's better to have a millstone hung around your neck and be thrown to the deepest part of the sea than to cause any children to stumble. We have to be very careful when we teach that we not teach wrong things, because that is a very, very bad thing for the false teacher. So we should pray and seek God's guidance before we say anything in regards to teaching, especially biblical things. And in this case, again, these men will be called to account later on. But this is what they're saying, and we will examine their arguments and dissect what it is that displeased God about what they said, and how when we speak to people who are hurting, people who are suffering, we have to be careful we not say things that offend God and that are hurtful to them. Job is in terrible pain. He's in agonizing pain. He's suffering, and these friends are of no help to him. They're not comforting him. They're not being compassionate towards him. He says, he needs compassion, not judgment, and not ridicule. So that when he opens his argument, he says, you have instructed many, and you have strengthened the weak hands. You have upheld those who are stumbling. You have made firm the weak knees, but now it has come to you. So does this sound familiar? Where someone's saying, well, you're the one who helped people in the past, and now you're the one who's needed help. This is similar to what is said to Jesus on the cross, right? Where the crowd's mocking him, saying, you helped others, help yourself now. This is very similar to that. And he's being accused of being wicked and being sinful, and God's judgment's coming upon him. But we know that God's wrath was poured out on Jesus, not because he was guilty of sin, but that he was paying for our sins. They of course did not understand that. But this is similar to what is happening, and the argument that God never slays the innocent, that no one who's innocent ever perishes, of course, is most wrong when it comes to Jesus. And that is what I think is most offensive to God, because these are the kind of arguments, this is the kind of mockery that Jesus would be subject to. So I'll skip to chapter 6 then. Then Job answered and said, oh, that my vexation were weighed and all my calamity laid in the balances, for then it would be heavier than the sand of the sea. Therefore my words have been rash, For the arrows of the Almighty are in me. My spirit drinks their poison. The terrors of God are arrayed against me. Job, when he did speak after 7 days of sitting there in silence, cursed the day that he was born. He wished that he had never been born. He realizes, as he's in his speech now, that some of the things he said were rash, that he should not have said some of what he said. But the reason is because he is in such pain. My spirit drinks their poison. The terrors of God are arrayed against me. He cannot sleep at night. All he has in sleep are visions, terrible visions. There is no comfort for him anywhere. All he has is bitter, and he just would rather be dead. He wish he'd never been born, is what he says, which is not right. God gives us life. It is a gift from God, and we should never say what Job had said. Oh, that I might have my request, and that God would fulfill my hope, that it would please God to crush me, that he would let loose his hand and cut me off. So he's wishing again he were dead. I would even exult in pain unsparing, for I have not denied the words of the Holy One. He does hold on to his integrity, that he's not going to admit that what God is doing now is because of some sin of his that is unconfessed. What is my strength that I should wait? And what is my end that I should be patient? Is my strength the strength of stones, or is my flesh bronze? Have I any help in me when resource is driven from me? He who withholds kindness from a friend forsakes the fear of the Almighty. So he's now accusing his comforters of being unkind to him, and he's right. My brothers are as treacherous as a torrent bed, as torrential streams that pass away, which are dark with ice. He says his comforters, his so-called friends, are treacherous, or betraying him. That they came to gloat over him. They came to accuse him of sin when he is in fact innocent. They're adding to his pain, not assuaging it. They're not helping him. They're causing him more pain. I'm going to go ahead and skip to the next comforter. So Bildad speaks. So the first person to speak was the oldest, the most, in this culture, of course, age is revered. They let the oldest guy, supposedly the wisest guy, speak first. He is, of the three, the most polite, because they get more and more coarse and more rude as they get younger, which is a lesson to you young people. Anyway, so this is the next speaker, Bildad. Then Bildad the Shuhite. Huh? Oh, we're in chapter 8. So Job chapter 8, thank you. Bildad speaks. Then Bildad the Shuhite answered and said, how long will you say these things, and the words of your mouth be a great wind? So the first thing this great good friend says to him is that you're windy. How long are you going to keep complaining and whining? Does God pervert justice, or does the Almighty pervert the right? If your children have sinned against him, he has delivered them into the hand of their transgression. Your 10 children must have been great sinners for this to have happened. What rotten kids you have. I mean, that's just unbelievable that, someone whose child dies, say some parent from Sandy Hook or one of these school shootings, would someone say to their parents, well, they must have sinned for this to have happened to them. This is God, obviously God's judgment. No one would say that. Could you imagine that? That is so evil, really. Anyway, that is what he's saying. Oh, your children must have sinned against God, and he has delivered them into judgment. If you will seek God and plead with the Almighty for mercy, if you are pure and upright, surely then he will rouse himself for you and restore your rightful habitation. And though your beginning was small, your latter days will be very great. Now, Job, it tells us, it doesn't tell us, the Bible doesn't say much about Job's children, except that they would have these parties, they invite each other over, they'd celebrate their day, which we assume is their birthday. And that after these celebrations, Job was worried that maybe because they're having fun and drinking and things, they might have said something rash, they might have said something to offend God. So he offered sacrifices on their behalf so that they would be made right with God. This is how much he loved them and cared for them. And now someone's telling him that they're dead because of their sin. It is, it is kind of mind blowing. But this is their idea of comforting him and helping him. I won't read the rest of his speech. Job answers, truly I know that it is so, but how can a man be in the right before God? If one wished to contend with him, one could not answer him once in 1,000 times. This speech is very interesting because this is kind of what God says to him later on. A lot of the things Job says in this speech are things that God is gonna throw back at him. You can't contend with God. You can't argue. You don't want God to come down so that you can argue with him. If you dislike something that God did, if you dislike that, some suffering, some pain, some difficulty in your life occurred, you do not you do not, we all think that we would like to have a chance to tell God where he went wrong, where he made a mistake, where he should have done something else instead of, and these are harmful things. These are definitely hard things, right? Yeah, your parent gets sick, gets cancer and dies, has a stroke, has a heart attack, has any number of terrible diseases. You lose a child, you have a miscarriage, you have car accidents, there are, injuries, awful, painful things, disfiguring things. All these things happen, and we think, we pray, we ask God for help, and we don't get what we want. We don't get a miraculous healing, and we hurt, and we think, well, why did God do that? We all wonder these things. We've all experienced these sorts of things. But if we ever were in the presence of God, we would never, no one would ever question God and say, God, why did you do this? If you're in his presence and you see him as he is, as Job will see him at the end of this book, there's none of that, no questions. We do not question God. We do not ask him anything. He asks us questions. We have to defend ourselves. He who removes mountains and they know it not, when he overturns them in his anger, who shakes the earth out of its place and its pillars tremble, who commands the sun and it does not rise, who seals up the stars, who alone stretched out the heavens and trampled the waves of the sea, who made the bear and Orion. He's talking about the stars, about the cosmos, that God created, all these things. All of these things God will mention too when he speaks. It's kind of interesting how this speech really does prefigure what God will say when he asks Job to defend himself. Behold, he passes by me and I see him not. He moves on, but I do not perceive him. Behold, he snatches away. Who can turn him back? Who will say to him, what are you doing? None of us can question God and ask him, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? The more we know God, the less we think that we would like to ask him these things. People who know God not at all say, I have questions for God and I'm going to get answers when I see him. And that's those people who would say that have no understanding of him at all. And it's very sad. I mean, you hope that they would learn who God is before that moment comes when they see him face to face. Otherwise, it will go very poorly for them. You certainly pray that such people would know God when they can still be saved, and they would seek him and love him. Though Job knows these things, he knows much about God, more about God than most people, right? That is why he's such a righteous person. That is why God favored him. He still, in his suffering, says things that are not right, and that's how it is. You can have somebody who's a Christian have walked with God a long time, and in a moment of suffering and moment of pain, utter things they should not have uttered. And that's part of being human. None of us are perfect, especially in circumstances like this. All that pain and stress and despair, we might utter things that are unwise, or and we shouldn't just condemn people like that. We have to understand where they're coming from. It's not okay, certainly, to say things like that they wish they were dead and things. That's not what Christians should do. We should live to glorify God, right? To live, to die is gain, and to live is the opportunity then to serve God and honor God. We should not be crying out for God to kill us. That is not what that we are called to do. But we can understand why people might feel this way. We feel well known people who are suffering, even Christians who are strong Christians, work with God a long time, and yet in the end, they desired to die. And we have to be compassionate and not judgmental as these comforters were, and hurtful. The last speaker is Zophar, the youngest one, who's he's the most blunt.
Well, what's happening?
Oh, chapter 11. Then Zophar, the Naamathite, answered and said, should a multitude of words go unanswered, and a man full of talk be judged right? Should your babble silence men? And when you mock, shall no one shame you? For you say, my doctrine is pure, and I am clean in God's eyes. But oh, that God would speak and open his lips to you, and that he would tell you the secrets of wisdom, for he is manifold in understanding. Know then that God exacts of you less than your guilt deserves. Can you find out the deep things of God? Can you find out the limit of the Almighty? It is higher than the heaven, and what can you do? Deeper than Sheol, what can you know? Its measure is longer than the earth and is broader than the sea. If he passes through and imprisons and summons the court, who can turn him back? For he knows worthless men. When he sees iniquity, will he not consider it? But a stupid man will get understanding when a wild donkey's colt is born a man. One of the more colorful expressions you have in the Bible. When a foolish person, when a stupid person will have understandings, talking about Job. When a wild donkey's colt, when a donkey gives birth to a human being, that is when a stupid person will have understanding. That is so they're insulting him directly now. It's not subtle. If you prepare your heart, you will stretch out your hands toward him. If iniquity is in your hand, put it far away, and let not injustice dwell in your tents. Surely then you will lift up your face without blemish. You will forget your misery. You will remember it as waters that have passed away, and your life will be brighter than the noonday. Its darkness will be like the morning. I will skip to chapter 12, and this is where we'll end here for today. So Job chapter 12, this is answered then. No doubt you are the people, and wisdom will die with you. So he is so Job chapter 12, Job answers, no doubt you are the people, and wisdom will die with you. He is mocking them now, saying that, oh, well, you have all the wisdom. When you three are dead, there will be no more wisdom left on earth. That you have all understanding. But I have understanding as well as you. I am not inferior to you. Who does not know such things as these? I am a laughingstock to my friends. I, who called God, and he answered me, a just and blameless man, am a laughingstock. In the thought of one who is at ease, there is contempt for misfortune. It is ready for those whose feet slip. There is a word that Germans have for that, having joy in someone else's misery. When something bad happens to somebody, like, if you're a 49ers fan and the Rams get blown out, you have that joy. That's sort of the Germans call that Schadenfreude, right? Schadenfreude. And so that's a good word to know. Want to laugh at someone else's misery. That's what he feels that they're doing to him. That Job was this man well respected, the wealthiest man in that whole area, the greatest person. We call greatness because of wealth great, but whatever. But he was a person who had a great reputation. He was a leader in the community. People who were in trouble went to him for help, and they received it. People who needed advice went to him and got it from him. And he was obviously blessed by God. And now he is the opposite, complete opposite. And he's feeling like they're laughing at him, that they feel superior to him, and they have no reason to be. He had not done something wrong. He had not. And now we have the Me Too movement. For whatever reason, people fall from grace. Job had done nothing wrong, and yet all this disaster has fallen upon him, and they're happy in a way because of this. And now they're coming on heaping accusations on him that he does not deserve. And so he's crying out against all these things. And I hope none of us indulge in such things as gossip, where we talk about the bad thing that happened to so and so, and somehow enjoy piling on and things like that. But that is why it's such a wicked thing. We should certainly pray for those who are hurting and who are having problems, not to have enjoy talking about them. So this book, Job, struggles with these things. How can God be justified in what he does when it seems wrong? When you talk about the suffering we see in the world, when we see the effects of hurricanes and flooding and tsunamis, when we see the effects of infectious disease, we see war and the atrocities that occur. in such things. How can a good God allow such things to happen? How can innocent little babies get killed by bombs and wicked men with guns? These are things that people question. How can a good God allow so much suffering and evil and wicked in this world? These men try to say, well, you reap what you sow. So these people must have done something bad. Something bad happens to them. The Bible says that, and they're not entirely wrong. Of course, there are times when that is true. When you do bad, bad things happen to you. There is judgment in the Bible when people break God's law. Sometimes it's instantaneous. When Uzzah touches the ark, he dies instantly. When Nadab and Abihu offer profane fire or strange fire in the temple, fire comes down and consumes and burns them up instantly. Sometimes God does judge people instantly. When Ananias, not just Old Testament, and when Ananias and Sapphira lie about the money that they gave to the church, they drop dead right then. It's instantaneous. As John Lennon might call it, instant karma. Got them. They came and caught them. They sinned, they died right then and there. But that is not how things work all the time. Sometimes things are delayed. When God judged the Canaanites, he waited 400 years before he brought the judgment on them, right? 400 years they're sinning, they're sacrificing their children to idols, they're doing all kinds of sexually immoral, wicked things, worshiping idols for 400 years. Then he brought the Israelites in from Egypt, and they wiped them out. That was God's judgment on them. Men sinned against God for a long time before the flood came, but there came a point where all men did was sin continuously, thinking about sin continuously, doing sin continuously, and God brought the flood. So sometimes it is because of sin. So when Jesus heals a man born blind, his disciples ask him why, who sinned, this man or his parents? And he says, well, in this case, neither. But there's another time he heals a man, tells him, don't sin anymore so that something worse might happen to you. So sometimes illness is from sin. People in Corinth were dying because they were sinning. They were unloving. They were profaning the Lord's table, and some of them were sick, some died, and that was judgment for sin. Other times it is for the glory of God. God is going to use their pain and suffering for good. In the case of the man born blind, he healed them, and God was glorified in his healing. And that is why he was born blind, not because of sin, except the sin that is common to all of us. Job, of course, admits that he sinned like anyone else. He's a sinner. He had sinned mostly in his youth, but in his older age, he walked with God. He was righteous. He was not living a sinful life. And yet all this calamity came upon him, and him not understanding it. He understandably wanted answers, but that is not what we should expect in this life. God does not owe us anything. God does not owe us explanations. We cannot call God down to explain why the difficult things happen in our lives. If we are children of God, if we believe in him, if we believe the Bible, we should trust him, regardless of what happens in this life. Trust him that somehow, in some way, it is for good, that we might understand one day, but not necessarily in this life. There's a song I want to end with. I think it's in. Can you pull up the songs? Do we have I Asked the Lord?
Yes. No.
Yeah. So we'll end with a song, and then that'll end lesson for today. So if you ask God to help you to grow in grace and faith and knowledge of him, then this is how he accomplishes it.
What was I stopping?
Yep.
Okay.